and welcome back to Kara's Kitchen. As I said in my previous video, we're going to be making a Parmesan chicken today. So it is going to be a little different than what you've traditionally heard of chicken Parmesan, where that's usually a breaded chicken and a sauce and cheese on top. So the way it's going to be different is this is going to be a Parmesan crusted chicken with a fresh Arugula salad on top. So it's going to be a little bit lighter. It's going to be absolutely delicious. So let's get all of our ingredients together and let's get cooking. Okay, so for today's recipe, I'm going to be showing you 2 servings of this. The original recipe is for 6. Obviously, if you're going to have more, if you're going to have less, just adjust the ingredients as needed. But here I have 2 pieces of plastic wrap. So the first one is on my counter, then I have my chicken, and the second one is right over the chicken. And the reason why I have this is because we're going to be pounding them flat to roughly 1/4 inch. Now, if you have a meat mallet, you can use that. I just use my rolling pin. So we're going to just hit it to get it nice and flat. And that's also why you want the plastic wrap, because you don't want raw chicken all over the place. So we're just going to pound them out nice and flat. Who needs a gym when you can just work in the kitchen, right? Okay, so, and then I also like the rolling pin because then you can roll it out and make sure it's nice and flat and even. Like you feel a little bit more on one side than the other. Just a little bit more. Okay, so we did our first one. We're gonna go ahead and work on our second one real quick. Okay, so now that we have them both pounded out nice and flat, we're going to set them aside so you can just keep them in the plastic wrap. That way they don't stick to each other. Here we go. And we are going to start getting our dredging station set up. So for this, you are going to need about 1/3 cup of flour. So you'll just add it to 1 plate. So this is going to be the first station that the chicken goes into. So we're going to coat it in the flour, which we're going to season with a little bit of salt, a couple pinches, and a little bit of pepper. We like pepper, so we use a lot of pepper around here. Okay, and then we are just going to give that a quick little mix. Now you don't need a whole lot, again, because we're just going to be dipping it in just to coat it a little bit. We're not looking to make a batter or anything out of it. Okay, so there's that. We're going to use our egg. Now, for each egg, I do roughly 1 tablespoon of water. I like that because it breaks the egg up a little bit and it makes it a little bit easier to coat the chicken or whatever it is you're going to be dredging. So we'll do our 1 egg. Again, making sure that there's no shells in there. All right. We're going to tilt it towards us a little bit. We're going to break it up and we're going to whisk it. Just because we want a nice, even mixture. We don't want it to be too watery, but we also don't want big old chunks of yolk or big old chunks of egg white anywhere. Okay, we're almost there. And I like this technique just kind of coming towards you. You can do away from you, of course, but I don't know, this just feels a little bit easier to me. And you're using a little bit of that folding method. All right, so now as you see, it has a nice even consistency to it. There's still a little bit of white there, which is totally fine. You just don't want big old pieces of it, okay? So now that we have that, we're gonna get our final dredging station done. So I have half a cup of panko. You can use regular breadcrumbs. I just prefer the panko. I like the way that it fries up. And to it, I seasoned it myself, so I used pinch of salt, pinch of pepper, about a teaspoon of oregano, and a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper, just to give it a little bit of heat. But you can buy it pre-seasoned in the store. And again, you don't have to use panko. You can use regular breadcrumbs, either store-bought or homemade. Okay. And then this is where the Parmesan part comes in. So I have a 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Again, you can buy it store-bought. I bought it at the grocery store. You know how they have the section where it's all of the specialty cheeses, and it's a more fresh version of it. You can, of course, buy it off the shelf down your pasta aisle, or if you're feeling really ambitious, you can take a big old hunk of Parmesan. You want to grate it really well and probably put it through your food processor just to get it nice and fine and even like that. Okay, so we're going to add it to our breadcrumbs, like so. And then I'll take the same spoon that I used with the flour, and we'll just mix it all together. Again, we want a nice even mixture. We want to make sure that every single bite has a little bit of the breadcrumbs and a little bit of the Parmesan cheese, because that's what's going to give it its beautiful brown coat and that wonderful crunch that you're going to get when you bite into it. Okay. So mixed together. So at this point, we have everything all set and ready to go. We are going to start with 1 piece of chicken. You can work in batches. It depends on how big your skillet is, of course. I wouldn't do more than 3 pieces of chicken in a nice big skillet. If you have a smaller skillet, do 2. If you have an incredibly small skillet, do 1 at a time, because you want them to cook evenly. And we're going to start our dredging. So you're going to start with the flour here. Now, a good rule of thumb is to have a dry hand and a wet hand. So the dry hand is going to work with all of the dry ingredients. That way, when you go to the wet, you'll use the wet hand and then back to the dry ingredients, so you don't get your hands all goopy. So we're just going to make sure this chicken is nice and evenly coated with the flour. Give it a little shake, because we don't want too much. Again, we're not necessarily going for a batter, just a light dredge. Okay. And that's also why it's important to season it. That way you get that flavor in every single layer. Okay, so we've dredged the first part. Now we're going to switch to the wet hands. And we're just going to make sure it's nice and coated in the egg. I give it a little shimmy and flip. A little shimmy again. Okay, want to make sure that every little part's coated. Now this kind of acts as the glue. That way the breading is going to stick really well, especially when you go to flip it over. And I just give it a couple little shakes, make sure there's no excess, and pop it over onto our breading. Switching back to the dry hand, I'll scoop it on there a little bit. That way when I go to grab it, I don't get my hand too goopy. To flip it over. Okay, so now we're going to take the edge here, give it a little shake, flip it over, and pat it back in. And then I just make sure that bottom layer got nice and evenly coated here. Pat it right in. Flip it over one more time. And just making sure that this side is nice and evenly coated too. Like so. Okay. So now we are ready to get frying. Okay, so now we have our frying station set up. At this point, we are going to be using our olive oil. Don't really need exact measurements, you just want enough to coat the bottom of your pan. And it's not really going to be a deep fry, which means there's not going to be a whole lot of oil in there. We just want enough to where it'll coat it, make it nice and delicious. We're also going to be using some butter just to give it a little bit of a flavor to it. So we're going to add our oil in. Like I said, just enough to kind of coat the bottom of the pan. And I like to just kind of swirl it around. Now I added this to an already hot pan, so it's all the way up right now. I'm going to be putting it down just a couple notches so that we're at a medium-high heat. And then we're going to add in a tablespoon of butter. Okay. And we just want that to melt and mix in with our oil. Now you can use a spatula. I like to use tongs, especially when I'm working with chicken, because then you can grab it and flip it over. And with breading, you want to be extra careful when you're using a spatula because you don't want to accidentally get in between the breading layers and strip it of the breading. Okay. Swirl the pan a little bit. Okay. So you see everything's nice and bubbly. That means it's going to be nice and hot. You do not want to add it to a cold pan. Otherwise, again, it won't get that browning. It won't get that crisping up going on. Okay, so you can use your hands if you want to keep your hands clean. Just because when you are working with raw chicken, if anyone hasn't worked with raw chicken before, you don't want to cross-contaminate because you don't want to get anyone sick, especially yourself. All right, so we're going to grab it with the tongs here. And we're going to lay it away from us. You hear that sizzle? And you want to lay it away from you because if it does splash up, it's going to splash away from you. You don't want to burn yourself. Okay, so we're going to cook this for 5 minutes on this side, and then we're going to flip it over and cook it for 5 minutes on the other side. Once we flip it over and it's cooking for that 5 minutes, we're going to start working on our arugula salad because it's going to be really quick to put together. And that way it's all set and ready to go and we can plate as soon as it's done. If you are working in batches, you want to make sure that your oven is heated to 200 degrees so that you can keep the chicken warm while you're working on the others. And then when you're working on your last batch of chicken and you're flipping it over for the final time, that's when you're going to want to start on the salad. And the reason why you don't want to start it is you don't want the salad to get wilty, because it is going to be a vinaigrette. It's going to have oil in it and it can make that salad wilty and it won't be as crisp as you want it to be. But you also want to make sure the chicken's nice and hot. All right, so we're going to finish browning on this side and then we'll flip it over. Okay, so we are ready to flip our chicken over. You want to be very careful because you don't want to mess up the breading, but you also don't want to burn yourself. So you're going to flip and again lay away from you. You see how brown and beautiful that crust has gotten? That's where all of the flavor and all of the crunch is going to be. And you don't want to flip it multiple times. The reason you want to only flip it once is because it can cause that breading to come off and it won't cook evenly. So, 2 reasons why we do that. So while that's cooking for the final 5 minutes, we're going to start working on our salad. And we're going to start with our vinaigrette. So you want a room temperature lemon, because if you're like me and keep it in the fridge to keep it extra fresh, you want to take it out and bring it to room temperature because we're going to want to roll it against the counter here so that we can get all of those little veins inside of it popped so we get as much juice as possible out of it. There we go. So I rolled it a few times. I have my cutting board here, and we're just going to cut it right in half. And I have a little container that we're going to juice it in. I have my mesh strainer again, just because we want to catch any of the seeds. We're just going to hand squeeze it right on in. If you have a juicer, of course you can use that. There we go. And again, especially since you're working with raw chicken, you want to make sure that you're washing your hands every time that you're handling the chicken so that we don't get anyone sick. No salmonella in this kitchen. All right. And be prepared. These lemons will try to squirt you a little. Okay. Getting all that good juice in there. So you'll get roughly a quarter cup from one lemon. Depends on how big it is and how juicy it is too. And then I like to use a little bit of a zest. Make sure you do rinse these off. I had already rinsed it, I just forgot to take the sticker off, is all. Because you're going to use a zester. I just have a regular grater. So it's not that big of a deal, it's just gonna make bigger pieces of zest in it so you don't need as much. And I'm just gonna take it and go along the rind here. And the zest is what's going to give it the extra hint of lemon flavor. And you want to be careful not to get into the white peely part, because that's when it's going to get bitter. You don't need a lot, just a little bit. So that's a little less than a quarter teaspoon. Okay? So now that we have it zested, we're going to add a quarter cup of olive oil. Or excuse me, half a cup of olive oil. Because you want a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you're going to be doubling this, you'll want roughly half a cup of juice and 1 cup of olive oil. Okay? And then we're going to season it to salt and pepper to taste. I'll do a couple pinches. Salt, a couple pinches of pepper. Okay. And then we're just gonna stir that up. I kind of tilt it to the side and do that folding method again. That way it's a nice even mixture. Okay, and we'll set that aside. So now we have 2 cups of arugula. Now, the original recipe says to use baby greens. I like the arugula because it has a bit of a peppery taste to it. So it's gonna give you a little bit more flavor than if you use just a regular spinach or a baby lettuce. And it's already washed and dried. A lot of them will come in the packages that are washed and ready to eat. Of course, if you want to be extra safe, you can just run it under some cold water in a colander and just make sure you dry it off really well. We are going to pour in our vinaigrette. And then I just use a pair of tongs. And you're just going to toss it in there. Because you want every little bit coated. There we go. And once you're satisfied with it, you see everything's coated, then we will add just a little bit more of our Parmesan cheese, because you can never have enough cheese, right? So just a nice little sprinkle in there, maybe a little more. We like cheese in this house. Okay. And then again, you're just going to toss it. Make sure it's all nice and even. Okay. And so our chicken is ready to plate. So we'll make sure we turn this off. We will grab our chicken. Be careful not to disrupt the breading here. There we go. And flip it over. Yeah, look at that. So right in the center of the plate, we're going to put that arugula salad right on top. So about half of the mixture right in the center on top there. That way it creates a really nice presentation, and you'll get a little bit of arugula in every single bite. Okay, so we have our finished product here. We have our crispy Parmesan chicken topped with our peppery arugula salad and our homemade lemon vinaigrette. Why don't we give it a try? And the way that we topped it, we made it so we get a little bit of arugula salad in every bite. That's perfect. You have the crisp all the way through, seasoned well, and then you have that fresh arugula zestiness on top. Perfect. All right. Well, that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining me here at Kara's Kitchen. Please feel free to tune in next week, and I'm going to show you how to make some garlic bread knots. If you do make this recipe, or if there are any changes that you wanted to add to it, please comment below, and I'd love to see your pictures. I'd love to hear any feedback that you have for me. And don't forget to subscribe to my video so that you can keep seeing more of these cooking videos and how-tos. Stay safe, and thank you so much. We'll see you next time.